Hey guys, this is Russ, and this is She Wolf Alchemy, and today we are talking about when you go no contact with family. So we know the topic of people going no contact with family members have definitely been a topic of conversation over the last couple of years. Oprah did a whole segment that I'm sure most of our parents, if your parents are boomers, saw and wanted to talk to you about, or share it on Facebook, an article or something about it. And I think sometimes when people hear no contact or that other people have want no contact with their family, it's kind of this idea of like, bro, blood is thicker than water, man. You're youngins, y'all be giving up on everything. Every little thing that make y'all mad, y'all won't talk to people. When the truth of the matter is, very few people wake up and says, you know what would really spice up my life? If I just was like estranged from my mother, if I just like disappeared from my father's life, it's not a decision that comes lightly. For most people that go no contact, it is after years of minimizing pain, years of repeated boundary violations, disrespect, chronic disrespect, lots of emotional manipulation, for some of us, abuse, or a sudden realization that, you know what, this dynamic only works if I abandon myself or shrink myself. Cutting off family is something that's actually very rarely impulsive. For most people, it is a last ditch effort after trying a whole bunch of other things. And today, I really want to talk about that because there's a lot of people who might be thinking about it, who maybe seeing other people doing it, and they're just like, I don't understand why this became a thing. And I just kind of want to break it down for you. But some of the reasons why most people end up going no contact. So, for a lot of people, going no contact usually falls in, I would say, one of like six categories, right? First one being like constant disrespect. It's not, oh, we got into one big fight. It's not, oh, there was one big misunderstanding. It is a pattern of fights, a misunderstanding, of not seeing you who you are, or repeating to see you as an individual person with their own autonomy, who can make their own decisions. Disrespect can look like a lot of different ways, but chronic disrespect is like every time your name come on my phone, or I know we're going to be in the same pace, my body tenses up because I know you better be on some bullshit. And not little bullshit, not the type of bullshit where you're just like, he's going to talk to me about, you know, pirate conspiracies. No, it's the type of bullshit where it's like, I have my therapist on speed dial the next day because I know I'm about to come to this Mother's Day brunch and it is going to ruin the rest of my month. Something's going to be said that triggers me. It reminds me of a time when I was 5 and I was defenseless. And so for now, I'm grown and I have self-regulation skills. So I don't react compulsively and violently, but I still have to take that same disrespect and be the adult when no one else in the room is being the adult. This can look like emotional or physical safety, lack of safety. Like my nervous system shuts down every time I'm around them. And here's the thing with boundary violations, because sometimes people think like, oh my gosh, you guys are being so oversensitive. Okay, they didn't respect your boundaries. Whoop-de-doo. That's what people in their 70s are like. But it's so much deeper than that. If you were with a partner and you were to tell people, like, I constantly tell this person, no, I don't feel comfortable with that. You're putting me in uncomfortable positions. Please don't address me in that way. Please stop putting me in these situations. And my partner constantly does. People will tell you to break up with them right away. Because when you are interacting with people who, when you say no, they hear convince me, it isn't no, just you ignore that. Because they try, they put in effort, they see you getting frustrated and they keep going. They see it as a challenge. Your boundaries are simply a suggestion that they don't take kindly to and they plan to do nothing with. Another reason would be identity suppression. You're not allowed to be who you are around them, at least not with punishment, at least not with mocking, at least not with taunting, at least not with making sure they make it as uncomfortable as they can for you. This can be parentification or emotional exploitation. You are not their child. You are the fixer. You are the therapist. You are the ATM. You are their emotional regulator. You may have spent your whole life growing around your parents. I use this all the time in therapy with clients who struggle with this. The healthy way for adult-parent relationship to be is that the parent learns how to grow around their children. That means I decide to have this child, and so I will bend and mold my life around making sure that they are safe. I'm the one that has to adjust. I am the one who has to prepare. I am the one who has to figure out how to meet their needs. But see, what happens in these situations is that the child comes in and realizes, oh, the parent is not going to do that. So I need to adjust. I need to figure out how to meet their needs. I need to figure out how to not have needs or make my needs as small as possible, not to rock the boat. Oh, they have a big feeling. I now have to do something to fix their feelings. That is an unhealthy parent-child dynamic. And you see that often in parentification or emotional exploitation. And one of the other really big ones we see is that a big life event happens that kind of wakes you up. These big life events can be parenthood. You become a mother, you become a father, marriage, therapy, success, grief, hell, even your Saturn return. Sometimes you have a really big life moment and it makes you realize how unsustainable your relationship with that family member is. For example, for some people, this can be like suddenly getting success, being really successful, and recognizing that, oh, it was never about me not being enough because now I'm successful. Now I'm helping you. I'm paying for your bills. I'm doing the community proud work and you still hate me. I thought you hated me because I wasn't good enough, but now I'm good. Now I'm enough and you still treat me like shit. You still make me out to be the bad guy. You still lie on my name and make it seem like I was the problem. For some people, this can be grief. This can be, I'm going through the hardest situation in my life. And you've always been hard on me. You've always been mean to me. You've always never been there and supportive. But I thought that was just because you had a lot going on. There was regular things happening. But I thought right now, as you see, I'm handling grief and you see I'm breaking down, as you see I'm not at my norm, you would at least attempt to be understanding and you're not. Now I'm realizing this just isn't, you're fragile and you need support. And now I realize, no, you're just selfish. Now I realize, oh, there is no line that you won't cross. Sometimes a big event makes you realize lies that you have been telling yourself to make this relationship work are actually just lies. And people decide, I don't want to do that lie anymore. Now, I've talked about this on the show before. I don't think I've ever got into detail because of how complex everything is with my father. I have a father. I have two dads. But one of my fathers, my biological dad, I'm no contact with. Me and him have been no contact. It's 2026. So I think about 6 years now. I think I cut him off in 2020. And I'll probably never really get into the details about that. That is a situation there's people in my life who know because they're aware of who he is as a person. And so they know. I don't think any of my siblings that actually grew up with him, because the man keeps popping up with new children every couple of years. So there's kids out there who didn't grow up with him as a father, who only got to meet them as adults, and they've only spent a couple hours with him at a time, who thinks he's a great individual. But all of my siblings that grew up with him as a father, first of all, more than one of us is no contact with him. Let's start there. I highly suspect, give it like 5 more years, I highly suspect any child that he has been a part of raising will be no contact with him. But none of them, I have to explain why I'm no contact. None of them. I have not actually sat down and had a full conversation with any of them about me being no contact with him. There is an understanding. we know who he is as a person. Um, and what's crazy? You guys know I'm a therapist. I actually had a therapist that I loved. He was a great therapist, but I don't know if that therapist was going through like divorce and he had a child not talking to him, but he was the only person I actually tried to have the full length conversation with. And I revealed some things to him that I have only said out loud one other time before. And uh, he turned it on my mom. He's like, well, let's talk about why your mom is attracted to narcissistic men. And I shut down. I shut down. I did not go back to therapy for 2.5 years. I'm a whole therapist myself. And I remember being like, okay, so that's an unsafe topic for you to have. It's unsafe for you to have that conversation. It's unsafe for you to have that conversation at your age. As somebody whose people came and talked to and had these conversations with, having that experience really, really shook me. And so that is something I still struggle with. And so I probably won't ever really reveal the full details of that on the podcast. It's not something I'm ready to. Also, it is a story that has so many other moving parts that I never want to say things that could trigger other people that might be involved, other people who might have been harmed, other people who have decided they don't want to tell their stories, but unfortunately our stories are intermeshed. For me to reveal certain things means that other people, it might connect some dots for some other people, and I never want to stir up something that other people aren't ready to have stirred. But with that said, I have been in no contact with my father, my biological father, for 6 years. And I remember when I first decided like I was going to go no contact, first of all, I didn't tell him at first. I just didn't tell him for a couple months. And then finally in 2020, so yeah, actually I went no contact in really in 2019. And at some point in 2020, he reached out to me. He was just like, why haven't I heard from you? And I didn't address everything. But I said, hey, these are some details of things you have done. What do you have to say about yourself about these details? And he didn't deny. He didn't deny. He didn't try to argue. He just said, I have not been harmful towards you any times recently, was basically his response. And I gotta be honest with you guys, I don't have a lot of memory about that conversation. I'm pretty sure I just never responded to him again and just removed myself. But I recall going through a good 2.5, maybe 3 year period where people close to me would be like, well, have you talked to your dad? And I would say, no, I'm no contact with him. And I had a lot of people in my life who, not trying to be harmful, but they were kind of like, oh, you're just mad at him, or, things can be worked out. That's your father. And, he grew up, he's a West Indian man. You know how them boomer West Indian men are. I had a lot of that. I remember there was somebody connected to me who knows what my father is and who he's capable of. And they had brought up, and at this time, it had been 2 years. They know I had not talked to my father in 2 years. They know I was no contact. And they were just like, yeah, and you ever think we should give him a call? You think you should extend the olive branch? And I remember kind of just going off. We were driving in the car. We were driving from dinner. And I kind of went off. I kind of was like, I sit here and told you that this was a person who was harmful, not to me, but to several people I know and I love. You know that this person can be harmful. You know what this person is capable of. My dad is a person that my dad is a narcissist. My dad is a narcissist, textbook narcissist. And I don't mean that in a way of oh, he sometimes is mean and is an asshole. Yeah, he's mean and he's an asshole. But I mean it in the way of I struggle with my weight. I've always struggled with weight since I was we we don't have to get into the full details. But since a particular incident happened, I've always struggled with my weight. And there have been years that I had body tea, and there would be years where it was like, what feeling are you eating? Like, you are obviously eating your way through some type of grief or something. And I was really, really struggling with my weight. I had just got out of a really, really bad depressive episode. I gained a lot of weight. Um, and I was struggling. And my dad took a picture of me, a very unflattering picture of me. I was sitting on the couch. I was folding clothes because my dryer had broke. So I had to go to his house because he had recently moved like an hour away from me. Something you guys should know, most of my life, my dad has lived in different countries, like since I was 6. There's a period of time where I actually did live with him in another country. But outside of that period, usually I would visit my dad, summer breaks, winter breaks, Christmas breaks in these different countries. And so anyways, this is the first time in like, since I was like 6 years old, that me and this man lived in the same country full time. And again, I had gained all the weight, and this man took a picture of me. This man took a picture of me and he sent it to people to laugh at me, to say how fat and disgusting I had got. To this day, he doesn't know that someone slipped up and let me know he did that. And then he told me the next day, he called one of his friends who was a doctor, and he wanted me to have a conversation with this friend. When I called the friend was like, yeah, your dad told me he wants you to be on amphetamines because you need to lose weight. Now, they said it way nicer, but I had no idea what I was even getting on the call for. That is the type of man my father is. My dad is also someone who, I didn't find this out until years later, that, you know, I wasn't close with my dad's side of family. Parents divorced when I was like 5. He moved out the country. And so I didn't really get to see that side of my family very often. I didn't really get to be close to my dad's side of the family after my parents divorced. And so it wasn't until I was older that I realized, like, this man had been consistently basically describing me to people as, oh, that's my dumb American child. Like, that's how he would describe me to folks. I kept having incidents where I would meet people through him, and it's kind of like, oh, you guys know those microaggressions when you're at work, and they're like, oh, you're actually very intelligent. I was having that, but I was having that with like family members. I was having that with other Black people who he was friends with, having that experience. And I was having it in my childhood, and I didn't think nothing of it. And then I became older, and I realized I was still having this experience. You know, people in his life, in his circle, looking at me like, oh, you're actually kind of smart. And I found out I had a family member who straight up told me, like, yeah, you're aware that he basically tells people like you're his dumb American child. Like, that's how he describes you. I actually had 2 people tell me this. And I remember being so broken and so hurt because, first of all, I graduated my master's with a 3.9 GPA. Let's start there. But like, I remember being so hurt and then immediately snapping out of it and being like, well, yeah, that's him. Like, that's how I had learned to operate with him. Like, even when he did things like that, I was like, oh, right, but that's how he acts. I had became so used to knowing that, oh yeah, the version of him that any of us know is not the real version of him. There are multitude of personalities that he puts on to frame himself whatever way he needs to frame himself, to frame other people whatever way he needs to frame them. Why I had to be the dumb child, I don't know. I have no idea. But like, that was like a normal experience of growing up with my dad, is constantly finding out that the image of me that he was portraying was a negative image. But I know there was always a new layer of secrets, of lies, of misconduct. But here's the thing, my dad is very educated. My dad had a very high position. He had a very prominent job. And so a lot of people that know him don't see that version of him, right? They see that this guy who grew up poor, real poor in the West Indies, real poor in South America. And he worked his way. He has 3 degrees. He is so educated. He was a diplomat, And that's what the version of him that people know. And so I knew when I was going to go no contact. And by the way, the whole taking a picture of me, sending me to Dr. to lose weight, that is actually the things I could tolerate about that man. That's not even. I wish that was the worst of what that man does. That is a Tuesday of being interacting with him as his daughter. But anyways, I had brought that up to just kind of give you guys a little bit of background. And so I'm having this person, I'm driving a car with this person, and they're just like, I don't know why you can't extend the olive branch. And I just kind of went off. I broke down crying and I went off and I said, for example, there was an incident that happened with one of my older sisters. She lives in London now, but they had came and got me. We were about to go. I don't remember where we were going. They had came and got me. Maybe we were in Barbados. We might have been in Barbados at the time, but we were driving around somewhere and I had a book. It was a coloring book. And my dad went through the coloring book, and in there I had his name and I said, I hate him, his name. And he looked at me, he threw it. And I remember, I think he like told my mom about it and I got scolded for it. And I remember like, as I'm adult and I was 2 years past me going no contact, driving with this family member. And they're just like, why don't you forgive him? Why don't we invite him over? Why don't we blah, blah, blah. And me just going, I have been trying to tell y'all since I was 6 that I hate this man. And it's a very conflicting feeling when you feel like you love a person and you also hate a person. And you're not even sure if you love this person or if like that's what you've been told. You've been told for so long, like you love this person. You're supposed to love this person. You love this person. And so you're telling yourself like, I love this person. But also, especially when you're a kid, it's very complicated. People tell you how to feel. People tell you how you're supposed to respond. You get corrected, even sometimes in subtle ways. Maybe you don't get spanked. Maybe you don't get yelled at. But people give you cues about, no, that's not appropriate. That's not an appropriate feeling to have. That's not an appropriate reaction to have. And that love is there because everybody's telling you you're supposed to love them. And as an adult, I have sat down with this person. I was like, I have broke down to you. Not everything, but enough of why I do not want this person in my life. And the dangers of having this person in my life. And you patted me on the back and you looked at me and said, oh my gosh, I didn't know. Is there anything else you want to tell me? Blah, blah, blah. And then literally a couple months later, you had a nerve to look at me and say, hey, have you thought about forgiving him? You want to talk to me about what Jesus would do? I felt so alone and abandoned in that moment because it felt like, again, those first 2 years, a lot of people, again, well-meaning, kept trying to convince me that, yes, your pain is real, but you should ignore that because family. Yes, what you're saying is valid, but not more valid than the unit and this idea of what family is. And I think this is a common occurrence and thing that happens with people who cut off family members, is that people who have never been through some of the things you've been through, who have never experienced the type of family you have experienced, can't fathom what it's like to have your experiences. And so that to them, they're like, but family is family. And it's like, but because you experience a different type of family. When you have a good mother who is loving and kind that just sometimes fucks up, it's very hard for you to understand someone saying that they want to cut off their mom because you still have memories of your mom being a good mom. And yeah, she might have fucked up every now and then, but for overall's good, you can't sit there and tell a person whose mother has been abusive to them from the time they were born to just give it another chance because you are not understanding that your definition of family is not what I experienced. And I felt like that's kind of what I went through. I felt like for the first couple of years there, a lot of people around me treated me like, oh, no, we get it. We understand. But, what about when you get married? You don't want him to walk you down the aisle. That man ain't never been faithful to a woman he married. Why would I want him to start off my marriage giving me away? No. The man is bad luck towards marriages, not only his own, other people's as well. We don't need to get into all the specifics, but it was when you kind of do that cutting off, there's a period of time And not just a period of time. Sometimes as you keep going on, you meet new people. There's this reoccurring thing of people just not getting it. And people, it's almost like people think you made this decision lightly. People think like you almost made this decision calmly. There's also some people that's like, well, you dealt with them doing all that stuff all those years. Why now? Why stop now? As if you being put in a position of pain and hurt means that you must stay in it. And you don't. You do not have to. Cutting off a family member, particularly a parent, there is a spectrum. It's not a binary act. Your cutoff can look in a variety of ways. The way my cutoff is that man is not allowed to have access to me. That man is not allowed to know where I live. That man is not allowed to have new phone numbers. That man is not allowed to follow me on any social medias. He is blocked on even the podcast page. My cutting off looks like nothing. You don't get to know anything about me or my life. Like anybody in my life who gives you information about what's going on with me, guess what they get cut off to? Because you're not respecting me. You're not taking seriously the boundaries I have set. But it doesn't have to be like that. You get to decide what you want your cutoff to look like. For some people, it is, I only talk to you at holidays because we all go to grandma's house and I still want to see grandma. And so on holidays, I will see you. I will nod my head, say what's up, and I'll go about my business. For some people, cutoffs looks like, look, I will no longer interact with you face to face, but you know what? We can text because I can control the speed, the space in which I reply to you. I can decide when to stop reading. When I realize you about to do too much, I can do text. For some people, it's public settings only. For some people, it is, you know what? I will, if I see you while I'm out and about and there's a public setting, fine. I will say hi. We would do pleasantries, but I can't do close, intimate relationships with you anymore. For some people, it is, okay, no, we still talk. I still got to go over there. I got to see. Maybe you cut off your mom. You're like, I still have a relationship with dad, so I'm going to hang out with dad and so forth. But I don't do any emotional disclosures to you. You're really not allowed to know anything about my life. Hi, Mom. What's up? That's good. Am I dating? Hey, I don't want to talk about that. Anyways, is dinner ready? It can be no emotional disclosure. It can be that polite but distant. It can be that I'm blocking you from everything on social media, and when I see you, I will be pleasant, and that's all. It can look like a variety of ways. You get to decide how much access this person has to you. Because here's the thing, estrangement isn't about punishment, it is about access restriction. Access can always be adjusted. Now, you might be wondering, okay, how do I know if I'm taking things too far, or do I really need to do this if this is worth it? I suggest you ask yourself a couple of questions. Ask yourself, have I clearly tried to communicate what I need to this person? And what has been their response? Is there a willingness to even try on both sides? Am I willing to try? Are they willing to try? Is this a person that acknowledged that they harmed me? Is there any evidence that this person is at least trying to change? Do I feel calmer or do I feel extremely dysregulated after every interaction with them? And then lastly, I would ask you to ask yourself, am I cutting off to protect myself or am I cutting off to punish them? Ask yourself these questions when you are deciding. It might be worth working through if there is evidence that they're trying to change. It might be working through if there is communication and there is a willingness still on your part. Sometimes we can still want to try. That's okay. But it is also okay if you recognize my nervous system generally cannot take this. Cutting off is not supposed to be your first coping skill, but it is an option there when you feel like I have tried and I can't take any more. And here's the thing, there are certain situations in which I personally believe you do not have to try. If I don't give a fuck what your religion says, there's certain types of abuse that if a person does, you do not need to try. I remember I was younger and I was reading a book by Joyce Myers. And Is Joyce Meyer still on the air? I am not in Christian people's business anymore, so I don't know if she's still popping. But when I was in college, like she was like one of the go-to like leading pastors, right? And in her book, I remember her talking about how her father sexually abused her all through her childhood. And then when he became sick, she took care of him and how that was so healing for her. And here's the thing, there are some people that they have that spirit of forgiveness. They have it in them to want to be there for them. Um, they have that spirit in which they feel called to like take care of them. They're like they're weak now. What they did was years ago, and there's no one else here. I feel the need to step up. And that is okay if that's the spirit that you have. But I want to be very clear. It's very okay if you are of the spirit of fuck them. I want nothing to do with them. They made their bed. They can lay in it. And I want to be clear in this because I think sometimes when people think about healing, they're like, and that means I have to forgive everything. And that means I would have to step up for everything. You do not have to forgive everything. I am big on this. You can move on and say they did this thing, it was harmful, and I am no longer going to give energy to it. But I do not release them for any karmic debt they got to that day. That is between them and whatever higher being that's dealing with them. And I want to put that out there because I have seen situations where people were put in very, very, very harmful situations, and people around them talk to them about forgiveness, and people around them talk about like, well, yeah, they're sorry now, you got to try, or people, you didn't even try to make it work. Yeah, if a person beat you, you don't need to make it work with that person. You don't need to try to communicate how that hurt. If a person sexually assaulted you, if a person put you in an emotional state in which you did not think you were deserving of love and basic human dignity and right, you don't need to go and then have that conversation with them. It is okay if there are certain circumstances where the pain was harsh and deliberate, and you just decide, I don't want to do this anymore. And I don't want to talk to them about it. I don't want to talk to them about circling back. I don't want to talk to them about their willingness to change now. It is okay to recognize my nervous system cannot take this, and so I am done. Now, here's the thing. So let's say you decide, okay, yep, I want to go no contact. And you're like, yep, I'm going to do that. There's a couple of things I need you guys to keep in mind because the transition into going no contact, people don't really talk about that transition enough. There is like transitional loneliness when you go no contact. I think for a lot of us, we think to ourselves like, well, they weren't really supportive anyway. I barely talked to them anyway. There's a difference between being unsupported and like having no options of support. There's a little bit of a grief phase, even when they're toxic, even when they were neglectful. Sometimes you can grieve that back then at least you still had hope. You still had a fantasy of like maybe one day, and it can hurt. And it could come out of nowhere. The holidays can hit different. You might not have any invitation any place because even though it was horrible going to your families, like you knew you had food for Thanksgiving, and now it might be the first holiday where you don't know where you're going. And like here's the other thing, y'all. I'm in the South, I'm in Atlanta, y'all know that. When you are a person who goes no contact, dating in the South can be hard. Dating in places where family loyalty is like cultural currency. Oh, the experiences you will get. You might get hit with that. Wait, so what you mean you don't talk to your dad? But that's your dad. But like family is everything. And keep in mind, you're dating these folks, and especially when you're not dating folks seriously, you're like, I don't really want to give you a trauma summary. And you can try to lead with things like, yeah, we're just not close. Yeah, it's complicated. You know, we have boundaries. And sometimes people can judge you off that. I remember I had a girlfriend who used to say, yeah, don't date no man who ain't close with his family because and his family don't want to deal with him. Who are you to want to? And I get the context of that. Trust me, I definitely understand where she's coming from with that. But I remember when I went no contact and being like feeling a way about it, like, yeah, but what about those of us who like literally we were the safest thing a part of that connection and we had to remove ourselves from it? Like not wanting to deal with certain members was more about keeping myself safe. And I really wasn't prepared for like how many people saw that estrangement as a red flag, as if I was the person who did the wrong and did the harm. And so if we're going to go in that context, especially my single folks, I need you to be secure in your decision, because that is going to come up at some point in time when you're dating, especially if you live in a place where, again, family loyalty is like it's like cultural currency. And so you want to make sure, like, to think about how you want to present that information to people. And I've had people, I had somebody in my life who did not understand it. I remember getting into it with them over this, because they're like, yeah, but that's your pops, and I pray. I should know what's gonna work, but I'm saying, like, and I pray that the Lord changes your heart and you talk to them one day. And I said, why would you pray that I put myself back in harm? It's a thing that might come up. So I just want you guys to be prepared for that. And another thing that might come up is like other family members trying to pressure you into reconciling. You'll hear life is short. You regret what's gonna happen when they die. Mm-hmm. You're going to sit there and you're going to wish. And I remember actually I had a conversation with a family member about this. Their whole thing was, what happens when they die? Mm-hmm. You're going to sit back and feel silly for all this time y'all spent not talking. And my exact response to them is that my grief will probably be complicated. Just as complicated as it would have been if they were still in my life. Except for I probably would have had more anger towards them. The grief is going to be complicated either way. So I might as well choose the way that allowed me to have some peace beforehand. You also have some people that will say, well, you know what? That's just how they are. And that's okay for you to accept that that's how they are. I don't have to accept that that's how they are. That is your standards. That's not mine. I recommend, especially when you're going to talk to family members that kind of pressure you about it, is to prepare a little script. Have kind of a catchphrase. Every time you get hit with you really should talk to your mama. You really should talk to your daddy. It can be something as simple as, hey, I'm doing what's healthiest for me right now, and I'm asking that no one takes sides. You do not have to debate your trauma with anybody. Now, but here's the thing. As life goes on, you'll have big moments that most people have their families for, right? Weddings, births, funerals, graduations. And these, again, just like holidays, are moments where you might really feel it. Even if you chose to cut off, you might question yourself. Did I make the wrong decision? Who's going to walk me down the aisle? Damn, is my child not going to know their grandma? Man, it sucks. I finally graduated the way, just like my dad wanted me to, and he's not even here to see it. And that's okay. You're human. Having those feelings, having those what ifs, questioning yourself, and having bits of sadness does not mean you made the wrong decision. You're human. And there'll be days you'll want to reconcile, like illness scares, birthdays. And on those days, I just want you to ask yourself, okay, before I reach out, has anything changed? Or am I just uncomfortable with the grief? Reconciliation is valid. I'm not against it. But it needs to be with structure, with boundaries, with clarity, and not rose-colored nostalgia. You got to remind yourself that there's a difference between being lonely in a crowded room and being physically alone. Sometimes cutting off family makes you feel physically alone, but it's emotionally safer. And sometimes that safeness and sometimes that quietness you get in that loneliness is the first time your nervous system got a chance to rest. Now, I don't want us to romanticize the cutting off and calling off everybody. You still need community. You still need chosen friends, chosen family, maybe some therapy, maybe some spiritual grounding. Isolation is not the goal. The goal is peace. It's peace. And as you are getting your peace, remind yourself you do not owe anyone an explanation. I said earlier, maybe have a catchphrase that you can just have as your kind of go-to saying when someone brings it up. But you don't need a dissertation. You don't need to have the trauma timeline so everybody can understand everything. You are completely allowed to say, it's a boundary for my mental health. And that's enough. I've told you guys, I've been no contact for 6 years. I have not had the full conversation with anyone about my no contact decision. Yeah. In fact, my dad is the person who probably got most of the information. Now, there's people, again, I believe no, but I have chosen to say because I decided not to, because I decided that interaction with him was not good for my health. I decided I did not want someone like him in my life. And the right people, they will see that, okay, they're walking in this thing and it seems like they feel great. And I respect that. Now, briefly, before I go to something ending, I do want to say, as an add-in, I should have maybe brought this up earlier, but for some people, you do need to take into consideration if there will be financial and practical impact to cutting these people off. What that might mean is you no longer have emergency childcare. What that might mean is you don't have a backup place to stay or financial cushion. And it is real for you to have to make sure your independence is real before you make that move. Make the move that's best for you, but bring some logic into it. And that can look like trying to find, okay, build community, get your emergency child contact backup, create your own financial cushion before you do it. That's real. Now, when I went no contact, I did have some things I had to think about. He was a part of my financial cushion. Not a lot. Definitely not a lot. But he was a part of it. He was a part of, if I had an emergency, he was the only person that was like here that could like actually get to me in an hour. And I did have to think about that. And for me, I just decided that, oh, well, I'm going to have to find others. And that's how my move went. But for some people, like, they might be footing your bill. Let's be real. There are people who are abusers who financially support the people they are abusing. There are people who are emotionally abusive and they keep it over your head that, look, I'm paying for your tuition, so you have to take my abuse. Those are real circumstances, and I don't want us to act like that does not happen. And that does mean you might just have to navigate differently before you make a more permanent decision. But bring your logic, and don't feel bad if, yeah, there are some things that makes it a bit hard for me to cut off now. Okay, wait till the time that it's safer for you to do so. Now, before we wrap it up, I want to say the truth of the matter is there are times where cutting off might not be the move. Sometimes we are just dysregulated in that moment, and it's something you can work through. Sometimes there is a little bit of us projected. Sometimes it is, no, this is just a hard conversation you need to have. And cutting off feels like you get to skip the hard conversation when the truth of the matter is the hard conversation could have solved everything. It could be you're just reacting to one particular instance. And sometimes distance is needed in those circumstances, but they don't have to be permanent. You want to make sure you bring some self-awareness into this matter. As I said earlier, it's not a decision I would make lightly. I've been thinking about going no contact with my dad since I was 16 years old. And back then, it was just easier for me not to do because, again, usually the man was in another country like 9 months out of the year. And so it kind of felt silly to go no contact because it's like literally I have to have one interaction with this man for like a week and then I don't see him for another year. And that felt doable. When that man moved an hour away and I started getting triggered every time I was around him and I started realizing I felt very uncomfortable and uneasy. Then I started having memory flashbacks and I start remembering things. And I had one particular incident that actually triggered it. Someone had brought something up that I had completely like erased from my memory. There's lots of things that I just put in the back of my unconscious and was like, oh, that doesn't exist. I had one person honestly bring this thing up after I had a really dysregulating interaction with my dad. And it just reminded me of like how much memory and self-abandonment I had to practice to keep this relationship going. It wasn't a one-time situation. It's something I have been thinking about for years and finally had the impact where I was like, you know what? No. Bring some self-awareness into it. try to distancing first in certain situations if you can. But if you did the things and it feels like that's the move you got to make, then that's the move you got to make. Because cutting out family isn't about being cold. It's about deciding what actions to you cost. And if someone keeps showing you they cannot afford the price of treating you with respect, you are allowed to close shop. But make sure you're ready for what comes with that freedom. Now, that's all I have for today's check-in. I hope you guys, I say check-in, but I just looked at the time. This was definitely longer than 15 minutes, y'all. I'm a Gemini. I swear. I talk and I swear. I'm like, oh, it's me doing this quick little thing. Nope. Nope. It's been over an hour. It's okay. I'm going to edit it down. Y'all going to get less than an hour by the time I finish editing. But I hope you guys enjoyed. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at She Wolf Alchemy, and we'll have a new episode for you guys next Sunday. Bye.